Hello, this is a quick demonstration of our QLive real-time dashboard and reporting solution for your PBX. I will be discussing the different types of supervisor dashboards, wallboards, and reporting inherent within the solution. So today, I'm going to log in as an administrator, so I have full access to the software, just simply entering in my login credentials. As you'll see here, I've logged in as an admin. As an admin, I am viewing a supervisor dashboard. This would be what a supervisor would be able to see. You'll notice that I had selected 3 different groups of agents, all right? These groups can also be linked to a hunt group, such as a hunt pilot, all right? So again, I'm monitoring 3 of those right now. You'll notice that the supervisor is going to see various different types of widgets here. For example, on total calls, abandoned phone calls, answered phone calls, and they can quickly modify the gauges based on what they want to see with drill down capability. So maybe they're curious in just abandoned phone calls and need to call those back or remind an agent to call back those missed phone calls. Also given a nice distribution of inbound, outbound, and internal phone calls in this group call statistic. We can also measure various different KPIs in this widget. So you'll notice the first one here is service level. What percentage of calls are answered within a given time frame, which is user defined? It looks like this call center is meeting 57% of their service level. Maybe they need to increase that. Also the average queue time, hold time, speed of answer, and so on, right? Also we're given agent activity, what agents are logged in, logged out, possibly in a do not disturb status, available, talking, and so on. It's not a requirement that you need to log in. It's just there. Some PBXs do allow you to log into a hunt group or perhaps log into the IP phone in order to make and receive phone calls. So again, not a requirement to log into the software, but it's there if you want to report on it, right? For example, the next dashboard here, which we can minimize, would be active phone calls that were taking place. So I'll show you how this works. You'll notice that in this top bar here, we're showing calls that are in the auto attendant, right, which will look like this. Looks like we have a 1 call in the auto attendant now. As that call moves through the IVR, possibly going to a hunt group, so example here, call is ringing the accounting hunt group. We see that call's been waiting for 6 seconds now, right? And then we get to see that turn into an active phone call here. So if you'll notice in the bottom of my screen, these are some active phone calls that are taking place. One, an inbound call that Mr. Hope has been on for 8 seconds. Another one Mr. Kent has been on. This is actually an outbound phone call that's lasted 37 seconds. You'll notice this is refreshing in 2-second increments. So those are active phone calls. We're also able to see agent statuses. For example, here, these are the 3 different groups that I chose to select, where I can see looks like Mr. Hope is on a talking status, been doing so for 30 seconds. We can also minimize maybe the accounting group because you want to focus on the sales group. Make sure your agents are making phone calls, answering phone calls, and so on. So again, we're giving those real-time agent activities. Also, you can load up an image here for your agent so you can quickly see who they are, which is, again, a nice feature of QLive, loading up an image and associating that with an agent. So again, those are agent statuses. Also, agent summary. So all of our dashboards and wallboards are based on a daily total. So again, if you want some daily statistics on your different agents, this is a great tool, great dashboard to where you can see total phone calls by agent and do a quick filter there. Looks like Mr. Kent's being the most productive there because he's had 703 phone calls. Maybe you're curious on measuring hold times. Looks like Mr. Kent has been putting customers on hold for an average of 4 seconds. Maybe you need some training there. Or maybe the average ring time. How many seconds is it taking before that agent were to answer a phone call, whether that's direct to their extension or perhaps through the hunt group. There's also something called alerts. So we have different KPI alerts which can be displayed here. I'll show you how to easily set those up based on your different alerts that are relevant for you or KPIs that are relevant for you. So again, I've just chosen 5 different groups. I could just choose, for example, customer service. Here's where I'm giving it a name, a description, and the type of alert that I want to deliver. So this would be if available agents are maybe less than 2 in any given group. Maybe if the total number of phone calls in queue is greater than 5. Your service level is not meeting a specific percentage. Maybe it's if more than X amount of abandoned phone calls that had taken place over a given interval. For example, let's just get a speed of answer. If speed of answer is greater than or more than 10 seconds, right, what can happen is we can provide a pop-up here, right? So that would pop up to the supervisor dashboard. We would also send an email. All right, so this could be a distribution list. It could be a specific email. It could be all the agents within that group to let them know, hey, why are there more than 10 phone calls in queue? Maybe you need to wrap up your calls. So again, you have these different alerts that can be displayed, and you can define as many of them as you'd like within the software, right? So again, I could toggle here and look at some of the alerts that I've set up calls in queue, available agents, more than 25 abandoned phone calls, right? So those are the different types of alerts. Also, there's an agent login. I always get the question asked, do we have to log in to QLive for the software to work? No, this is just for the agent to be able to see their statistics over the course of day. Maybe they are very curious about their abandoned phone calls. Again, they want to drill down on those and call them back very quickly. Again, they can toggle the different gauges based on what they want to see, right? So again, maybe they're curious on just handled phone calls or total calls. Again, modify the gauge. This agent, Ms. Diaz, is logged out. She has a 0% abandonment rate and so on. So again, given some nice statistics on that particular agent. Also their daily activities. How long have they been in available status versus unavailable dialing and talking, right? Again, which can be modified based on what you want to see in their activities, right? Also to foster a competitive environment, you'll notice that these are the different agents within the group. So Mr. Kent could log in, or in this example, Ms. Diaz, and notice that Mr. Kent has answered more phone calls than she has. Maybe Ms. Diaz needs to answer more phone calls to keep up with the other agents in the group. So again, this fosters that competitive environment. So that's the agent dashboard. There's also a wallboard. So wallboard is meant to display on a projection screen, maybe a big monitor there, hence the reason that these different KPIs are a little bit larger. But you could also display this on a laptop or a PC, so supervisors accessing this information from any PC, right? So you'll notice that we have different types of layouts. I'm showing the layout there on different KPIs. For example, I can see total number of phone calls, available agents. Maybe you want to modify this and just show the calls in queue. Again, everything's configurable. Also, the KPIs that are displayed here, we can modify based on what we want to see on this particular widget within the wallboard. So as you can see, there are a number of them to pick and choose from. You can add, modify, make changes on the fly. Also, agent activities, how long have your agents been available, dialing, ringing, so on. Also, call volume. This is very important. You're going to want to make sure your workforce is staffed efficiently during your busy hour. So maybe that's at 6 o'clock because there are 133 phone calls. Also, given the nice distribution of phone calls by group, right? So again, that's one of the layouts. There's also a layout for group performance, all right? So this is going to give you a nice matrix on the different groups that that supervisor or wallboard user can view. Again, you can modify this to give them just access to specific groups that you want to give them visibility into. For example, here, we're able to see that, we're meeting our abandonment rate. We're also meeting our longest time in queue standards and so on. Maybe you notice the accounting group is a little bit more productive than the customer service group and so on. So again, giving you a nice tabular breakdown in all the different groups. Also some group totals. Again, we can see the distribution of phone calls, total calls, offered calls, and again, make changes to the gauges that you want to see or graphs that you want to see here. Maybe that's just abandoned phone calls that you're most curious about. Another layout is agent-based. So maybe this is a small office and you're running competitions on who's making the most phone calls or answering the most phone calls. You have a scrolling marquee that you can modify based on what you want to display to the agent. Again, user-defined text. For example, we have a wall of shame. So it looks like Ms. Sands hasn't made or received any phone calls. Why is she not pulling her weight in the group? Whereas Mr. Kent's made 707 phone calls. So he's winning the competition if you're basing this based on total phone calls. Maybe you're curious on just answered phone calls or talking duration. So again, you can have different types of competitions based on what you're trying to achieve. You'll also notice we can see calls waiting, calls in queue, total number of agents, and so on. So again, 3 different layouts that you can pick and choose from within the wallboard, right? Finally, I'd like to get into the reports. So again, the QLive solution is reporting on the agents that you want to monitor. So we are able to provide historical reports as well within the report generator. You'll notice that there's over 35 different templates that are available. And these reports can also be scheduled. For example, let me show you how easy it is to pull a report. I'm going to go to the agent stats report here. All right, you'll notice that you can pick and choose the groups that you want to include in the report. You can also filter by the agent that you want to include. You pick and choose the date and time filtering parameters. So I'm showing all calls from beginning of the day to the end of the day on February 2nd of 2017. I can filter by direction. Maybe that's just inbound phone calls that are over a specific duration or under a specific duration. Here's where I can give it a report name if I want to save it. I can pull it in multiple different formats. I can send it to the screen. I can save it as a file. I can email it directly from within QLive, as well as include a graph. So let's just pull this to the screen. Let's include a pie graph, or maybe you want to include a donut or column or horizontal bar. So really can customize the graphs based on what you want to see. I'm choosing pie graph. I'm going to pull a quick report, which is going to give me the ability to provide stats on all the agents that this user can monitor. All right, so again, I'm able to see that Mr. Kent, here's the distribution of inbound, outbound answered, and missed phone calls, and so on. So again, nice pie chart distribution, which I chose there. We're also able to see some statistics on maybe the average speed of answer. That's a really important metric for you to track. Or the longest time on hold. Looks like you put one customer on hold for 16 seconds. Maybe that's a minute or two, and Mr. Kent needs additional training, right? Again, he can measure that, or he or she can measure this performance with Miss Lowen there. Looks like Mrs. Lowen isn't putting customers on hold at all. So that's great, right? So again, that's an example of how to pull an agent stats report. If you're curious on maybe just agents that are putting calls on hold for long periods of time, or just want a quick call detail report by agent, again, those can clearly be defined. Maybe you want to report on the productivity of an agent over the course of the week, right? You'll notice we have agent daily summary, weekly summary, monthly summary. I'm going to do this by day, all right? So let's go back to last week on the 26th. So that will give me a week's glance of productivity by agent. And let's pull this to the screen, run the report, and we can quickly see the nice distribution of phone calls by agent per day. So again, we can see that Mr. Kent on January 26th may have received 72 total phone calls. 36 of them came in directly to their extension. 36 of them came in through the ACD or the hunt group, right? So this is a nice statistic giving, calls that came in directly to agent, also calls that came into the ACD or hunt group, given some totals, abandonment rate, or insert total, abandoned calls, missed phone calls. Missed phone calls are a combination of abandoned phone calls and calls that went to voicemail. So again, that can be very useful for you to track. Right? So that's an example on daily summary statistics. Maybe you're curious on activity. What times of the day are the agents logging in or logging out? Right? How many times over the course of the day are they putting their phone in a do not disturb or stack? So that could be an agent unavailable detail. Maybe you want that distribution in a summary format. For example, here, let's include a graph. Let's leave that at pie chart, run the report. And again, it's going to give you the nice distribution of calls or agent activity over the course of, again, this month, right? So again, I have the total amount of time in a ringing status, talking status, and a do not disturb status, so on. And again, that nice distribution here to where you can see, again, most of my time here was spent in that ringing status, right? So that's an example of agent summary report. Let's go back and just include a day's worth of data and show maybe agent login. How many times over the course of the day are they logging in, logging out? Maybe there's a specific times that they're supposed to take breaks. Again, this is going to give, all the times that, they'd logged out over the course of, that day there. Right, versus login time. All right, we also have some group performance reports. So you'll notice we can get calls that are just coming into the group in detail, also summary, maybe just abandoned phone calls by group. So those rang into the ACD or to the queue or to the hunt group that were not answered for one reason or another. They weren't even delivered to an agent. Also missed phone calls. So a lot of times after calls ring for a specific amount of seconds, calls might go to voicemail as well. So this is going to give you the abandoned phone calls and calls that go to voicemail in one report. Maybe calls that are transferred out of the group. A lot of times there's overflows or calls are delivered to maybe a DID to an outside, phone number there. So again, how many calls are transferred out of the group? Maybe you're curious on some performance details. So I'll show you an example of one of these reports. Let's just choose our sales group over the course of the day there. I'll run the quick report, pull it up to screen. All right, so this is going to give some nice statistics there on the performance of the sales group. Right? So it's pulling up to my screen here. Just give it a moment. So we can see that in that sales group, there are 4 different agents. Looks like Mr. Kent, Ms. Lowen, Ms. Diaz, and Mrs. Knoll. Right? We're given the distribution of phone calls that were direct calls, so that would be calls directly to their extension, all right, as opposed to calls that came in through the ACD or hunt group, right? And then we're also reporting on outbound phone calls as well. So again, these could be outbound phone calls that were placed by that agent within the group. And again, some nice metrics to compare the different agents in group. Which agent's putting customers on hold the longest? Looks like Mr. Kent. Maybe need some additional training. The max hold time of 16 seconds. All right, what's the max talk time and so on. So again, very useful in measuring performance of each one of the agents within the group, right? Also, if you have an SLA and you want just some totals, you can quickly see the average hold time of the group was 10 seconds and the average talk time of 1 minute and 40 seconds. So that's an example of a group performance report. We'll notice we have some user reports here on maybe just missed calls that are peaking. So for example, let's just leave it at that sales group. Let's choose over the course of day, but in this case, let's choose a different graph. Something that's a little bit more relevant might be a line graph. So again, line graph now becomes an option to where I can pull this report and identify what's my busy hour over the course of that given interval chosen. For example, here we're seeing several times over the course of the day there, we peaked at 10 phone calls, right? So do you have 10 agents in that group? If not, customers are sitting on hold, right? So again, giving that nice line graph here. Also the distribution of phone calls in 1 hour increments, calls offered, calls missed, and then by day of week, right? So that's just a quick example of calls with a peaked missed phone calls or peaked calls. We can also report on maybe just longest times in queue. So show me where calls exceeded maybe 10 seconds of queue time. Again, just within a matter of seconds, I can pull up those reports, again, by defining more than 10 seconds. Maybe I'm curious on identifying just all my queued calls. Again, we can report on all queue calls. The KPIs that had taken place with a quick snapshot and pick summary. Again, how many times have that alert gone off to where there's been more than 10 phone calls in queue. So I get the snapshot. I also get a quick summary. DNIS reports are very popular. A lot of times call centers will have a toll-free number or a main DNIS that they're calling into for various different companies that they're representing. Also, maybe it's a company that's doing some sort of direct mail or advertisement on Google, and they want to track how many times has this 1-800 number or toll-free number or any DNIS been dialed, so they can measure the revenue that they're making. How much direct mail are they sending out, and how many phone calls are they deriving from those direct mail campaigns? So again, we have a DNIS detail report, also a DNIS sequence report. So a lot of times customers, they're paying a lot of money for these advertisements or for the call center to handle their phone calls, and they're going to want to know, hey, how many times was that call transferred? Was it put on hold? Where was it dropped? So we're given the sequence of events in this DNIS call report here. Finally, one of our most popular reports, our customers are curious on tracking the life cycle of a call. We define that here as cradle to grave. So you'll notice that I can pick and choose the agents that I want to include in the report. Maybe this is by group, the time interval, the date interval, in a summary or drop down. Maybe it's by direction. Let's just choose inbound phone calls that had hold time in them. All right, again, I can choose just those phone calls, do a quick search, and it's going to break down all calls that had hold time. Looks like Mr. Kent had put customers on hold several times over the course of the day. What I can do is just double click here, and it's going to give you all the events that had taken place. So a call originally came into the auto attendant for 16 seconds, and then it went to Mr. Kent. It rang for 4 seconds, and then Mr. Kent picked up the phone and talked to this person's phone from this person's phone number for 19 seconds. Then he put the customer on hold for 10 seconds and transferred the phone call to Miss Smiley. Right? Miss Smiley let the phone ring for 8 seconds before answering it, and then talked to the customer for 24 seconds and finally disconnected the phone call. So Miss Smiley disconnected the phone call. So again, multiple transfers could take place here. If there's call had gone to voicemail, it would also be tracked as an event. So again, life cycle of call, very important to report on with various different types of filters that you can pick and choose from. Another option would be maybe just pulling the drop-down of all the events that have taken place. You'll notice there's a unique identifier here. We can see, it looks like there were 8 events that had taken place. Maybe that's what you really want to measure. If there's been more than 8 events that had taken place on any one phone call, let's drill down on those and see if our agent needs additional training. So again, that's cradle to grave report. So again, this has been meant to be a brief demonstration of all the different wallboards and reporting inherent within QLive. Do know that we can set this up with your PBX. Maybe you have multiple PBXs that we're connecting to. You can define each one of your different users that you want to give access to in the software. And maybe that's an administrator, like how I'm logged in today with my user ID and password. Maybe that's a supervisor. Maybe I want to toggle to this Martin Richards user here, make some changes on who Martin as a supervisor can monitor. We'll notice that, again, I've given him supervisor access and the ability to monitor 6 different groups there. If I only wanted to give him access to the sales group, I would just leave the checkbox there and everything else null. So again, I could put Martin Richards in another permission. Maybe that's Wallboard, maybe that's administrator, maybe just an agent. As an agent, they're only able to see their calls. So again, I can assign Martin Richards to the Martin Richards user there, and again, he logs in and only able to see his productivity and other agents within the group that were fostering that competitive environment to where they can see those missed phone calls. So again, setting up the different users. We'll also notice that here under Setup, you do have the option to, or actually under Assign here, you can set up your different groups. So we'll notice that the support group, there are 3 different agents that are assigned to support. If I wanted to add, delete, make changes, I could easily do so. You'll also notice there's an extension here. That extension is either the queue number, or it could be a CTI route point. It could also be the hunt pilot, so we know when calls come in, they're initially routed to this extension, and then finally to the agents, DNs, or extensions there. So again, that's the agent or the groups, and then we also have agents here. This is where I can load up an image for any one of the different agents. I'm giving them an alias, their extension, and then email here. You may remember that I can set up the KPI alerts to deliver to, favorites. So it's nice to have, just a group of different email addresses that I can pick and choose from to send those notifications to. Okay. Something that is nice is we will synchronize with your phone system. So typically what happens is you'll provide a list of the hunt pilots or perhaps the agents that you want to monitor, and then we'll be able to pull those in from your phone system so they're automatically tracked with any sort of add moves and changes to the phone system. So again, it's not a requirement that you maintain all of the different extensions here because they're going to be synchronized with your phone system. So again, just want to thank everyone for your time today. If you have any further questions, feel free to reach out to Metropolis or your reseller. I'm going to log out here, and again, everyone have a wonderful day.